The slave loves his master. What do I mean by that? Picture this. The slave is a person. The master is the ego. The slave oftentimes has no idea that they are a slave to their own ego. The ego is a master. And the ego doesn't have your best interest at heart. The ego only has its own interest at heart. And one of the most important thing the ego will try to do, it will try to anchor the slave into this 3D reality for the slave to never try to remember who they really are. That is, a free person. That freedom is your birthright. And that the only way to reach freedom, spiritually talking, is to unshackle yourself from your master, aka your ego. It is when you start to understand that the first step on a spiritual journey towards spiritual awakening, which is to remember who you are, that we are everyone, everything at the same time, that we are the higher self, we are God, we are source, we are infinite consciousness, call it whatever you want. And usually when someone is not yet freed from the ego and on their way down the spiritual path towards spiritual awakening, these people are enslaved. And what is quite interesting in that situation is that, as I said before, oftentimes the slave has absolutely no idea that it is a slave, that they are a slave, that they are actually not living the life they should live, not living their own life, but their ego's life. Because again, the ego doesn't want you to remember that you are everything in this world. In fact, the ego doesn't want you to remember that you are everything but the ego. And the ego, don't get me wrong, is that little voice that is needed in this 3D world of ours in order for you to have desires to do things and to create things. But that is as far as the ego should go. After that, the ego should shut the up. It's funny how I, don't don't say the F word out loud, but you understand me, right? The ego should just be muzzled, or like I love to say, the ego should be tamed, because again, there is no such thing as ego death. If you could kill your ego, aka that little voice that basically helps you function in this world, then you would be brain dead. And that is not what you want to do. You don't want to kill your ego. So there is no such thing as ego death. There is only ego taming, ego muzzling. And it's entirely up to you when and if you should remove the muzzle from time to time. Then you put it back on. The ego's snout. So yeah, it is something when you embark on a spiritual journey, when you only have an inkling that, wait a minute, that little voice in my head that's never been really nice to me, that little voice that's always told me that I would never amount to anything, that I could try to do this or that, but why bother, because I won't make it anyways. That little ego that tells me you'll never manage, to have a beautiful career if that is what you want. You'll never manage to land a great job if that is what you want. You'll never manage to go out with this girl or this guy if that is what you want. You'll never manage to have a family if that is what you want. Or the dating scene is absolutely a hellscape, as one of my past videos where I describe why. And again, it's because of the ego. And all it takes is a change in thinking, or dare I say, a change in perspective. Because at the end of the day, spiritual awakening, aka remembering who you really are, that is not the ego, but source, everything and everyone at the same time. At the end of the day, spiritual awakening is only, and I say that loosely because I know it's really hard, it can be really hard, is only a change in perspective. A perspective where the ego was your master and you the slave, to a perspective where the ego is muzzled and put back right in its place where it belongs, and you are your own master. You are completely free. You live in freedom 24/7. And you have no more doubts, because doubts are created by the ego. Can you imagine? You live a life without any doubt. You live a life without any lack, because when you reach spiritual awakening, you understand that attachment is the source of all problems. And so when you live your life with non-attachment, you cannot attach yourself to anything or anyone. Therefore, while you are grateful for the presence of said person, said thing in your life, should they leave you or should that thing disappear or be destroyed, then you only keep the gratitude that you had of having had them in your life, and you go on your merry way. So you live a life with non-attachment. You live a life with gratitude. You live a life with unconditional love for yourself, first and foremost, but for everything and everyone around you in this planet. You don't need to know people to have unconditional love for them, because every single person, thing on this planet is a drop of source that chose to incarnate in said things and people in order to experience life in this 3D world of ours. So you love everything and everyone because they are you. And you are in complete and perpetual joy, a sense of freedom, a sense of gratitude, knowing full well that when something is happening to you that the old you would have labeled as negative, you know full well that it is actually a lesson sent to you by the higher self, and that you will try your hardest to learn it and be grateful for it. Because you do not listen to the ego anymore. The ego is not the master anymore, and you are not its slave anymore. But until you reach that level of spirituality, and by the way, you don't need to reach spiritual awakening to understand that. You just have to be a little further down the path of spirituality to realize that. Until you reach that level, and you reach that level of understanding that the ego is your master at first, and that your master doesn't have your best interest at heart, and that you are the conscious or unconscious slave of the ego, until you reach that level of understanding, then you cannot, break the chains of your slavery, of your enslavement to the ego. But as with everything, it's always a choice, and it takes only one choice for you to decide to break the chains of enslavement to your own ego and live the life that you are meant to live. That is a life free of ego enslavement, a life of limitless happiness, possibilities, a life guided by gratitude, non-attachment, no expectations, unconditional love. And then this life of yours becomes a paradise. We were not on this planet, we didn't come on this planet to suffer. We came on this planet as drops of source to experience ourselves, to remember who we are, and to realize that this world of ours with all its flaws, is still perfect as it is, because this world of ours is a world of duality, cannot have good without bad, etc. I mentioned that in some of my past videos. And that everything that happens to you, once you start to understand that, or even better, reach spiritual awakening, everything that will happen to you subsequently will be just perfection. But it takes a little effort and a choice from you to break the chains of ego enslavement and say, okay, now I'm going to be my own master. I am no longer a slave to my ego.